Welcome to the State of the Nation. South Africa is a place rampant with corruption. It's been like this for the last 25 years. But it's not often that things get caught so perfectly as was caught by my next guest, and that is renowned journalist, author, generally a great investigator, and that is Pieter-Louis Myburgh. Pieter-Louis Myburgh, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Mike, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. There's going to be a lot to unpack, and certainly the IDT is a space we're keeping an eye on, and there's still a lot that's going to unfold there. So it'll be exciting to unpack those issues.
This episode of the State of the Nation has been brought to you by Pace Car Rental. We would like to thank Pace Car Rental for sponsoring us, and we want you to support them by hiring your next car through Pace. Go to their website, the address here below, use the code SONA, S-O-N-A, to get a discount. And now back to the show. Now, you have done a lot of stuff. Obviously, you know, I was telling you just off air, I managed to find here on our bookshelves a well-read copy of The Republic of Gupta. You also wrote Gangster State. Those books were pre-COVID. Those books were largely in the Jacob Zuma era. And it helped me sort of remember back to when corruption was perhaps a little bit easier to understand because you had one set of bad guys, the Gupta brothers together with Zuma. Now it seems like all that's happened is that we've outsourced corruption to just about every level of government. Have I got it right or wrong?
Look, I think that's an interesting comment, and I think it's a fair comment to make given the perception that is out there in terms of our corruption dynamic. But I think what I've found, and it's reflected in Gangster State, for instance, and in other exposés during that era, is that I think the public and the larger media had incorrectly framed it as such. Had incorrectly framed this dynamic that it was only the Guptas and Zuma perpetrating large-scale state capture corruption. We now know, and because of the Zondo Commission also and other kind of revelations, the state capture phenomenon was much more complex and very intricate and involved many more players other than the Gupta family. I mean, they like kind of rose to prominence as the poster boys, the poster brothers for state capture. But our work on PRASA, for instance, shows that they were a entirely unrelated state of state captors operating in that state only, being the likes of companies like Mr. Fumbo, which got that 3.5 billion rand locomotives contract. So definitely, it never was only the Guptas. It was never the situation. They were just probably among the more prominent, and they managed to capture the presidency itself, which gave them kind of like a special position in the state capture hierarchy. But going into the Ramaphosa era, then absolutely, I think what is really concerning is that we had this cleansing moment, supposedly, this cathartic moment with the Zondo Commission, circa 2018, 19, 20, 21, that period, where we were supposed to have grappled with and finally dealt with top-level corruption and state capture. And we now know that we didn't. While Zondo was sitting there in Ramaphosa, in Johannesburg, while it was being televised and we were all being captivated by revelations coming out from Zondo, there were new actors quietly in the background sinking their teeth into state departments, and those are the current state captors in South Africa. And those are the people who've captured the Gauteng health system, the National Department of Health, other key avenues and state-owned entities in South Africa where rents are still being extracted based on this state capture dynamic.
And now we have a situation where, as you pointed out, that there's almost not one arm of the state that isn't subject to corruption, stroke rent seeking, or any measure. I mean, just the revelations of what's happened in Gauteng through one entity, the Tembisa Hospital, is nothing short of breathtaking. But yet the same people remain in power. I suppose for somebody like yourself, there's a never-ending stream of leads to follow, and they're not even leads; they're fully blown stories. They're not even trying to hide the corruption anymore. That's the way it looks to me. Is that right?
Yeah, it's absolutely rife. It is widespread, and you're absolutely right. So we get tip-offs and information all the time, and if I say that we get to 10% of them, I'm probably exaggerating. We probably don't even get to work on 10% of the tip-offs that come out into only our little secure Dropbox or whatever the case might be. It just does seem that corruption still is a key, or maybe the key problematic dynamic in South Africa that we haven't fixed yet. It just seems to pervade every avenue, every corner of the government, local government, provincial government, state-owned departments, national departments. All indications are, just judging on what we see through other investigative outlets and tip-offs and leaks and the kind of revelations that General Mukwanazi made in KZN the other day, relating to our criminal justice sector, really concerning allegations about state capture and criminal syndicates controlling our criminal policing sector, which really, really kind of is extremely concerning, obviously.
So, Peter, before we get on to the Mkonazi allegations and the criminal justice system, as well as investigative journalism and other things, let's just first, talk about the Independent Development Trust issue, the IDT scandal, which you helped to unearth. Just first, before we even get to the point where the CEO and her spokesperson tried to brazenly bribe you, sketch us some background as to what was going on there and what were the sums involved.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. Thanks. Because I think a lot of people's attentions have been drawn to the video expose, where actually there's a story behind the story, obviously, which is the one that they tried to make me abandon by paying me off. So I've been looking at the IDT since October last year. We published a string of articles from October last year detailing an 800 million rand oxygen plants tender that the IDT had rolled out on behalf of the National Department of Health. So just a quick recap, the IDT acts as an implementing agent for other government bodies, primarily where there's a sort of a social infrastructure motivation, schools, roads, hospital kind of work, that kind of thing. The IDT steps in and takes over the procurement on behalf of those departments. So they did that for the National Department of Health, and it just seemed from the get-go that the oxygen plants tender was absolutely mired in corruption and wrongdoing and malfeasance and tender irregularities. So we blew the lid on that. And luckily, that led to, and I have to always make a point about the value of investigative journalism in society, that led to a PwC report that now also culminated in the situation where that contract is no longer being pursued. So that put me on the path of looking at the IDT on a more deeper level. And as we do, we get in contact with more sources and individuals close to those environments. And I finally got some information on the CEO, Tebogo Malaka, who appeared to be involved in some very shady property dealings. And that led me to that Waterfall property. So I was getting closer and closer to that Waterfall property, and it became all the more evident that her Waterfall new build that she was building there in that estate, it was very closely linked to a IDT contract, as being Mr. Colin Mashawana from the Colin Mashawana Foundation. And I think then at that moment, it was in early June this year when the spokesperson contacted me out of the blue. And I think I had triggered enough alarm bells for him to say, there's something concerning this journalist is really getting close to something. And they then approached me. That's where the whole conversation between myself and the spokesperson ensued, where he intimated that they could make life better for me. We can work together. And we would have a meeting with the CEO later on. And we decided at that moment. So I think this is what people need to understand. I know there are questions about, I didn't take the money because it wasn't enough, etc. It's like we put the cameras there. This is our sting operation. We decided at that moment that we are going to take the meeting with her. And if they want to offer me money, we'll be ready to document it. That's what happened.
But there was also an attempt, wasn't there, when Minister Dean McPherson, Minister of Public Works, suspended the CEO, that suddenly some media houses got involved to try and discredit Minister McPherson.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. And, we're not scared to name names here. Which media houses were they and what were they alleging?
Yeah, no, they need to account for it. So I've been very vocal and open on my social media platforms. So it's open and out in the air. The likes of JJ Tabane wrote for Times Live indicating that there was a conspiracy between the minister and myself to smear the IDT and especially its CEO. And that tied into a much broader social media kind of bot effort to perpetuate or to distribute the same message, disinformation campaign. And it's all been debunked, and Times Live had to retract that story. But there certainly was, as soon as I started working on the IDT issues, and as soon as the minister, which, a minister concerned about his, department and the entities that plug into it is wont to do. He read about the oxygen plants issues and he started taking action, and then this narrative was concocted about him and I colluding to target a black CEO at the IDT and to target the IDT for political reasons, to make sure that there's a DA-aligned board and CEO instilled there and all that kind of nonsense. It just doesn't stand up to the facts, which is the fact that we independently investigated the IDT and the minister decided to act in whichever way he thought appropriate.
Yeah. Times Live, they're making a name for themselves as maybe the new IOL of South Africa, where they prepare to report stuff that they then later have to retract. It's a bit like trying to light a fire and, hoping that it'll catch.
Yes, yeah, and in this instance, yeah, that's unfortunately so. But our old friends at IOL were kind of at it again, because as we were publishing this Colin Mashawana piece, there were some IOL pieces coming out and Sunday World pieces that were very favorable about Colin Mashawana and essentially defended him and took the line. But there's a whole funny backstory around that, and maybe we can get into it if there's time.
Yeah, so the gist of it is that stuff's going on at IDT. Money's being paid for work not done. Your eyes must light up when suddenly spokespeople start calling you, and you set up this operation, and lo and behold, out comes the Gucci bag full of money.
The IDT spokesperson pulled out a white Dior shopping bag stuffed with 200 Rand notes and placed it on the table. This while his suspended boss sat looking on. I asked them how much money they bought for me, and they said it was 60,000 Rand. But they also intimated that there would be more money coming my way if I dropped my investigation into Malaka's house. After the cash had been placed on the table, I casually photographed it for our records. Next, I duly informed Malaka and Makvalane that I wouldn't be taking the alleged bribe after all. I told them that it had always been my intention to get them to present me with the cash, and that I had never intended to take it. And then just like that, our meeting was over.
Yeah, that moment will forever be burned into my journalistic retina. We planned for it for the moment. So, and just very clear, we didn't incite them or encourage them to pay me off. That was the intention right from the outset. Like the very first meeting in June with the spokesperson, he made it clear that that was what they wanted to do. We expected it. And still, when it actually happened, when that Dior bag was put on the table and it was stuffed with these, the color, these orange 200 Rand notes, my eyes almost still popped out of my head. And I had to kind of navigate the situation. And a lot of people laughed about the fact that I pulled out the camera. And the reason I did so was because I know what security footage can look like. It can be grainy. It's not the best quality cameras because a lot of them are concealed cameras, so they're quite small. I just wanted to make sure that we had something that proved that it's actually money in the bag and not some random item which they could then say it wasn't money. We just gave him documents relating to a story or whatever the case might be. So
I love that, because there were people that tried to say there wasn't really money, even though you had taken these pictures. But I love the quick thinking, because you said that this is an app that can count the money. And I was thinking, it's quite a good idea, but who would use it and when? But so at that meeting, outcomes, and I did mention Gucci. Sorry, Gucci. This is Dior. I'm not sure which one's more expensive. At the meetings, the IDT CEO Tebogo Malaka and her spokesperson Pasha Makhalane. He's the bag man carrying the stuff. And she was sort of saying, let this go, because it's putting a lot of strain on her family and so on. A couple of questions. My first sort of feeling was, how crazy is it in South Africa? In the moment of madness, the thing that people should be outraged about is that the bribe's bad enough, but the fact of the matter is that when faced with massive corruption, you would have thought the people to bribe would be a policeman, but they don't even have to bother to bribe a policeman. So they're trying to bribe a journalist, knowing that if you are silenced, then the police just won't do their work. They don't even have to waste money on the police. Is really my first thought to that moment.
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
Mean, that's one possible take on it. But my concern, however, is that pockets of our law enforcement agencies are being bribed not to do their work. We are getting indications of it and rumors, and there are real concerns that large patches of our law enforcement officers, doing the anti-corruption work, are bribable. I'm very concerned about it. I think it is the case.
Yeah, so maybe they're getting theirs in a ShopRite carrier bag and not just a nice Dior bag. So let's just finish this off. Subsequent to everything that's emerged and your videos and exposés, what has actually happened to Tebogo Malaka, Pasha Makhalane? What's Colin Mashawana? What's actually happened with the case?
Yeah, those are good questions. I mean, that's the accountability part. And currently, I mean, there are a couple of things underway. The IDT Board of Trustees has launched an investigation into Malaka's conduct, specifically her conduct documented in the video. So that's a separate investigation. There's the PwC investigation into the oxygen plants contract. That's kind of like also being pursued, and there's a criminal element to that. And I know that the Hawks have opened the case around that. And then Mr. Pasha Makhalane, that I'm not sure exactly what his current status is, if I'm honest. I don't know if he's the spokesperson of the IDT at present. I should maybe push the IDT board just for an answer on that, because I mean, it would be quite absurd if he's currently, as we speak, on 10 September 2025, still the spokesperson of the IDT after all of that happened. I hope it's not the case. But then very importantly for me personally, and I would encourage people not to lose sight of this element of the story, it is that IDT EPWP project where a lot of the workers weren't paid. So that is the element I hope the Hawks are going to look at. I understand there is a Hawks inquiry into it. It might manifest into a formal Hawks investigation. And then also the issue about Malaka's property. There's a lot more work that needs to be done on the cash flows and how it moved and what exactly went into building that beautiful property.
Yeah. Now, Peter, if one then moves on, and I watched the Daily Maverick gathering where a whole lot of luminaries were on the stage. You were there, part of telling this story and a few others. But I was most interested with Shamila Batoy, the outgoing head of the Hawks, who has obviously come under a lot of criticism for being completely hawkless in her job, of 5 years, where she's came in with much promise, tough talk and seemingly achieved nothing despite having 5 volumes of Zondo Commission on her desk. But she came out firing. She was out there saying, the problem's not me, the problem lies with the system. And, so I want to deal with a few things. Before we get to the system, she made a mention of something which I thought was an inference to what you had done, to say, it's all very well for journalists that only have to give this much evidence, we have to give that much evidence. Right? And it's almost quite disparaging, I felt, to say that what you had done wasn't really investigation. They have to do so much more. And I'm trying to work out when I'm watching that, what more could you do other than, here's a video of these people giving me money, and here's the whole video we've created of the whole story. What else would a judge want to see?
Absolutely, Mike. I thought it was an astounding moment, and I'm glad you picked up on it, because later in my session, I called her out from the stage. And not only her, also Edward Kieswetter. It's interesting from those pockets that 2 remarks were made that day, or 3 remarks in the same vein. The Deputy Director of Prosecutions, Omar, I forget his surname now, made a similar comment, where they claim that there's this massive crevice between their work and the work that investigative journalists do. And I then, quite frankly, think they don't really read our work then. Because if they do, they would say, they would realize to what degree it is backed up by factual forensic evidence. And it's always been the case. I know that it's not all media who does it. I mean, there are newspapers who run to the front page on very flimsy allegations. But let's draw a clear distinction between the proper forensically oriented investigative journalists who put out this work. And it's not just me. Just think about the likes of, News 24's investigations team, that currently does very good work. Definitely there's a pocket of investigative journalism that delivers hard-hitting, evidence-based journalism. And for her to say that these are flimsy allegations and that they have to do so much more work is utter hogwash. And I will call her out on that, and she can debate me on it if she wants, but that was a fib. It's not true. And I think she really needs to consult the work again, maybe familiarize herself with the depth of forensic evidence that goes into this.
Yeah, and it's not only that. We've got overflowing prisons, and one would say if the bar is set so high, then how do those poor people end up in prison if, given the keystone cops that we have that have to investigate that, what judges are finding anybody guilty if the work you have done is not enough to find somebody guilty? It's just astounding. Which sort of brings us on to the point of the legal system. Now, we've seen some of these lawyers at work, these guys who can seemingly get anybody off anything, any allegation. We've seen how many trips to court by Jacob Zuma, getting him off, and ministers doing sort of contortions to prove that, swimming pools are actually fire pools and distorting other facts and figures. We saw it in the Republic of Gupta. Is our bar too ridiculous? Can nobody ever be proven guilty of anything if you've got enough money? I mean, is that the case, or am I missing something?
I do not think it's the case, no. I think, as you point out, there are very savvy and talented criminal defense lawyers out there, certainly. But I think the problem might be that the prosecutions have not been strong enough. It's not because it's difficult to prosecute people in accordance with the PRECA and POCA Acts, the relevant legislature here that deals with corruption and money laundering, etc. I think just to date, the cases presented to court have not been strong enough. But if somebody laundered funds corruptly from a state contract and you have the evidence base for that, a judge will rule in your favor if the evidence base is there. I mean, you can't argue against that sort of evidence. And it's unfortunate that we've seen so few strong cases presented in that because, there's so many instances where there's concrete evidence of that occurring. So I don't think it's the case that the bar is too high. I think maybe it's just the work and the pool of people who've so far worked in this kind of investigations and prosecutions have not been big enough, they've not been resourced enough, in some instances not talented enough. I think there lies the problem, is in fixing those shortcomings in the law enforcement and prosecutions environment.
Now, recently we've seen some high-profile assassinations of people, doing a lot of this work. We saw recently the murder of Boa van Niekerk, who's an insolvency lawyer, in his own office getting gunned down. We saw the Murrays, Thomas and Clutie Murray. We saw the auditor in the city of Ekurhuleni, Mr. Malofa, he got taken out. Is this trend, do you know of any action that's happening? Because certainly it seems like if you take some of those older cases like the Murrays, it doesn't look like people are getting much closer. And most worryingly, it seems like the people behind it are very, very, very close to politicians. This all starts leading into the allegations of Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, isn't it? Do you think that, there's obviously merit in what he said, but do you think the very action of President Ramaphosa, that instead of investigating it, he's called for a commission of inquiry, which he then immediately hobbles? Do you think that this has got legs? Do you think this is going to turn into another Zondo commission, or do you think more will come of this?
Yeah, look, I do have very real concerns about the outcome of that commission of inquiry. I absolutely agree with you. I think the moment was there to just effectively and simply tackle the issues that have been raised by numerous experts and politicians, opposition politicians, as regards our criminal justice system. The NPA and the police, the SAPs, the Hawks. We do not need another commission of inquiry. We only need to populate those institutions with the correct people, with the good leadership and the good investigators and the good prosecutors needed to turn that ship around. We are just going to endlessly circle and talk about issues and never take action. I mean, there's Justice Raymond Zondo, who wrapped up his work in 2021, 2022 or thereabouts. 3 years later, he is also now frustrated. And the other day, actually, which is quite an unusual step for someone in his position, came out and criticized the lack of action on behalf of the Ramaphosa government regarding what came out of the Zondo Commission. And now we've got another commission of inquiry. I'm utterly cynical about it, I'm sorry to say. I don't think it'll achieve much in just more talking and more information. If it doesn't get concretely investigated by criminal investigators in the SAPs and the Hawks and then lead to prosecutions, then it is worth nothing. And there's already instances, they don't need an investigation, a commission of inquiry to start investigating some of these allegations. They do have a proactive mandate. They can start, if there are claims about a contractor like CAT, whatever that person's surname is, having captured X and Y, investigate it. Don't go and wait for an entire commission of inquiry that will now play out over a year, and the report needs to be drawn up, and then you start considering investigations. The time to act is right now, today. The allegation is there, investigate it.
Yeah, I've got a really cynical view of commissions of inquiry, and just indulge me for a minute. When you start hitting those downslopes of your life and you start imagining how you're going to make ends meet until you meet your last days on this planet and you've just retired, the best thing on earth would be to be called in to do a consulting job, which of course these commission of inquiries is a consulting job for Justice Madlanga, who's now been, just retired. And you know that if you do your job properly, you probably will never be called in to do another commission of inquiry. So, the system's almost loaded against the judge doing his work properly. We saw that with Sisi Kampepe. We've seen it with how many commissions of inquiry where a judge that formerly had a decent reputation, literally just doing a pale version of an inquiry.
Yeah,
to me, the system's loaded against it ever coming to a conclusion.
It really has become an utter farce. Mike. I mean, we had the PIC probe of inquiry and the one looking into Marikana, and I can't think of any concrete action that followed from it. And then the Zondo Commission too. I will make a little bit of a caveat there. I'm still glad we had the Zondo Commission. I think it publicly aired something gigantic, which was the state capture phenomenon that it kind of, risked totally collapsing this country. And, it led to this collective awakening in South Africa as to the scope and the threat that this problem poses. But, again, now you've got Zondo himself speaking out against the lack of action, and then that really puts the ball squarely back in the executive's hands in terms of why they're not acting on it. So, obviously we're all going to be following this KZN commissioner, but I'm not holding my breath in terms of it being the vehicle that'll take us to real steps to fix those problematic domains.
Yeah, if one can say that probably the most important thing that came out of the Zondo Commission, other than it did perhaps slow the rate down of grand capture, what it did do was it pushed the ANC below 40%. And another unsatisfactory commission of inquiry will probably put them down to far lower, which leads me into the next question. As you see it, if a new government had to come in, and I know we're looking for heroes in this country, if a new era dawned on South Africa, is the system still repairable with the people that we've got to man the system? Are there still enough good people that could turn things around for South Africa, or have we just reached the tipping point on corruption and organized crime?
Mike, you will be happy to know that despite the focus of my work and all the misery and doom that I surround myself with in pursuing these investigations, I'm actually an eternal optimist. I still cling to that hope and the South African spirit. I think the short answer to your question is yes. I think South Africa has the talent and the dedicated people to right the ship, to put us back on the right course. It's just a matter of getting those people into power finally. I don't think the systems are beyond saving. It'll take time. It's almost like, let's take the city of Johannesburg as a little microcosm of what might have to be done. I think a new administration can fix it. I mean, it's just too big to fail. It's got all the industry out there on the East and West Rand, all those factories out there in Edenvale. It's an economic powerhouse. We cannot let Johannesburg fail. And a administration with the right people in power, with the right talent, can still fix it. I think the same goes for SA Inc. I think South Africa Inc. is a wonderful thing that has to be saved. And I think we can pull together as a center, we can pull together a band of talented, dedicated, enthusiastic South Africans who've all said enough is enough. We live in a beautiful, diverse country that is worth saving. And our moment to do so is now. I think we really need to rally and start thinking more broadly in terms of connecting varied sectors of society, people aligned to this idea that South Africa is one worth saving, it's a country worth saving, that we have the means and talent to do it. And I believe that we are going to achieve it.
Peter, let's talk about, the role of the media in all of this. Now, when I mentioned to you my sort of first thought when I watched your video was to say how unbelievable that somebody who's involved in corruption's first thought is to bribe the journalist. Maybe it wasn't their first thought, but maybe, it was right up there. Then my second thought was, here's a journalist who's at least prepared to expose it. How many journalists would turn down the Dior bag full of orange notes? It seems to be in the hands, real sort of constructive journalism now seems to be in the hands of few. If we've seen recently, obviously we saw Iqbal's survey and what he did to Independent Group, turning that into almost a mouthpiece for everything that's wrong. It seems like Times Live is going down the same route. It seems like there's a very thin line between, on the media side, of people that are still brave enough to talk truth to power. Are you concerned that there's fewer and fewer people in the media space, especially the established media, newspapers, television, that are prepared to, do some investigative and hard reporting? Or do you think it was always like this?
Yeah, it was. So firstly, there's just a quick point about the bag. It's also come up quite a bit. I think like 60,000 Rand would have been, somebody might have said no to it because of the quantum and not because of the ethics. But I do want to mention there that the actual offer on the table was for me to get tenders, right? They wanted me to bring contractors to them, and I could have had my run of going through IDT tenders and, getting my cut from those. But, about the media environment at the moment, yes, I'm concerned. My colleagues in the space are concerned. We have seen a significant reduction in the size of media organizations over the last couple of years, the size of their newsrooms, and the size of, or the offering of experienced investigative journalists who have the ability and experience to work on these kind of stories. We are a very small band of people at the moment. I honestly, this kind of like money laundering, cash analysis, document analysis type of journalism, I wonder if there are currently 15 of us doing it in South Africa. I think that'll be probably maybe I'm eyeballing it. 1-5. So yes, there's a total gap in the number of journalists who can investigate top-level corruption like this. And there's an ongoing debate and a discussion that has to be we need to have about how we are going to address the media landscape and its shortcomings. It's certainly, it is definitely happening in-house as we speak at all the major news organizations. It is an ongoing issue that they're grappling with. The readership numbers and the advertising revenue that's been siphoned off to the major social media behemoths. And those social media entities are profiting from our work because, they're drawing eyeballs to their platforms by reposting our work, and they're not channeling some of that revenue back to us. And luckily, there are industry-wide attempts to address that. See the precedent-setting moment in Australia and elsewhere in the world where the Googles and the Facebooks are now compelled to divert some of those profits back to news organizations. And then obviously the Competition Commission has started that process in South Africa, or at least a discussion about it. So there's my little glimmer of hope. We have to see a more fair distribution of those revenues where it can be proven that the social media giants are benefiting from our work. And there are instances of that. It's an ongoing issue. We have to fix it, but we definitely need more qualified, dedicated investigative journalists to do this work. It's a time-consuming and a costly form of journalism because while I'm looking at these months-long investigations, I'm not delivering copy on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis sometimes, right? That takes me out of that supply chain, and that makes it costly. But is it worthwhile? Absolutely. We are stopping multi-billion rand contracts in some instances when our revelations lead to civil pursuits where the contracts are set aside. We just have to kind of make this decision to form a new kind of social compact that says investigative journalism is vital for democracy in this country. We need to safeguard and protect it and ensure that it is funded adequately.
And I think it's worth pointing out that it manifests in South Africa through corruption, through the halting of corruption or the highlighting of corruption. We've got to point out that overseas, where there's in other countries where there's a very similar phenomenon, it's leading to more and more authoritarian regimes that understand that you just have to get to a few media houses and you can control the narrative. And to your point about social media, myself included, where we survive often on the back of the work that you do, is worrying. And I saw that in the Competition Commission's work that they did last year. The numbers were quite staggering. About 14 billion rands worth of South African ad revenue went to Google and Meta, which is YouTube and Facebook, etc. And 500 million was paid out to creators, whereas in the past that money would have gone into media houses who could then fund these very expensive investigative endeavors. But really, I think we can only congratulate you on the work that you've done and the exposés and try and give you about as much air as we can possibly give. But I think it's been wonderful talking to you. We'll definitely have you back on the State of the Nation. Pieter-Louis Myburgh, thank you so much for joining us today. To everybody that joined us, please like and subscribe the State of the Nation. Support our partners, Pace Car Rental, Manzi Water, and a few others that are helping to keep us on air, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Every business needs a world-class video to show to your clients and prospective clients. When the Stream-In team isn't filming the State of the Nation, they are producing those world-class videos for companies just like yours. They have got all of the equipment, drones, microphones, whatever you need, and the technical know-how to film a proper video for your company. Visit their website.